I welcome everybody as we honor Rav Ariel Showklapper to Psalm 120, which is a break from that huge Psalm 119, those 176 verses, to now, almost catch our breath and begin an easier climb. In that this morning's psalm, which begins the 15 Psalms of Ascent, is only 7 verses. Ken Urshula and I were talking about how local synagogues have utilized images of Shir HaMa'alot, which translates as songs of ascending, song of ascents. One local synagogue is called Shir HaMa'alot. Rabbi King was in Israel during a terrible tragedy in a northern town where there was terrorism called Ma'alot, where school children were killed by terrorists. And he was so moved by it that he, as the creator of the synagogue, thought a way to honor Ma'alot and those children, but to elevate it, was to call the synagogue Shir HaMa'alot. And Ken Urshula shared, having been the cantor at Temple Beth El with another wonderful rabbi, Rabbi Alan Krauss, that when that synagogue in South County was being fashioned, Rabbi Krauss said the 15 steps from the vestibule upwards toward the sanctuary, we need 15 steps. And when Shula says the Torahs were brought in, they were brought into the songs of Shir HaMa'alot. And indeed, the rabbis identify these 15 Psalms, 120 to 134, with physically ascending. But there is debate as to what was being ascended. So in a Mishnah of Midot 2:5, there's a description of the woman's prayer section. And there it is said that they contrast between where the women's section was located and the Israelite section. There were 15 steps. Other scholars, so that's of, second century Israel, an identification. Others identify it, scholars, with 15 steps from the main plaza to the main platform on which the altar rested. That gets used, for instance, as the description in Sidur Lev Shalem. And that the Levites would sing the 15 Psalms as the priests alighted the steps from the common to the more sacred. And the notion that the temple had different gradations of sacredness is also described elsewhere. Mishnah Kelim, chapter 1, verses 8 and 9. And there's still another, if you will, description of what are these 15 steps. And that's how I first heard about them. If you go to Jerusalem today, on the southern entrance, there are these recent archaeological digs that have uncovered from the city of David beneath it, going up to the Temple Mount, there are 15 huge steps. And the first time I heard about it was a tour guide saying, can you imagine the experience of the pilgrim coming up to Jerusalem? And up above on the Temple Mount was an orchestra of Levites and musical instruments. And the Psalms of Ascent were played as they went up the 15 steps. The 15 Psalms were heard. And that's a pretty dramatic image of anticipation, of celebration, of elevation, of moment. And yet, somebody like Saadia Gaon, who born in Egypt and lived in Babylonia as the head of the community, 882 to 942, said that Shir HaMa'alot only refers or does refer to the Levites singing in a higher key. that it's a musical notation. And what's clearly true is that the description came after the psalm as an introductory line for these 15 psalms. With that, without any further, there's so much more to share, which I hope to do more of, but let's begin with the psalm itself. I choose the title from the closing line, verse 7, Ani Shalom, I am peace. Others will translate it as I am for peace. By just leaving it as I am peace, it conveys for me a stronger statement of I embody the qualities of peace. I am inwardly in that place that I am peace. A contrast to those who are haters of peace in verse 6, to I am peace, which also says there are people who hate me because they're haters of peace and I am peace. And so as this psalm begins, there is a tension. Namely, the psalmist is describing distress. And the challenges we have seen in translating Hebrew is there's only two tenses, perfect and imperfect. And perfect, which is the case here, can either be present or past. So it can mean to Adonai, I am in distress, I call and God answers me. So number one, verse 1, can be in the present or in the past. So that's one ambiguity. And I'll say, even before I begin to read, that issue of the ambiguity of tense is true for verse 1, verse 2, verse 6, and verse 7. Robert Alter, for instance, will say that a song of ascents, when I was distressed, and then the psalm is what he called out. All right, I'll come back to that. Let me read it. Let me read it in English. And today I'm going to also read it in Hebrew because it's short and there's a cadence in Hebrew. First in Hebrew, here are the cadence. And again, see yourself as a pilgrim. That's the other explanation, that these Psalms of Ascent were the songbook for the pilgrims going up to Jerusalem. Shir HaMa'alot El Adonai B'tzarata Li Karati V'ya'aneni Adonai Hatzila Nafshi Misfat Sheker Milashon Remiyah Ma Yiten Lecha U'ma Yosif Lach Lashon Remiyah Chitzei Gibur Shenunim Im Gahalei Retamim Oya li, ki garti meshech, shechanti im ohalei kadar, rabat shachna lah nafshi, im soneh shalom, ani shalom, v'chi adaber hema lemilchama. A song of ascents. To Adonai, when I was distressed, I called and God answered me. Adonai, save my soul from a lip of a lie, from a tongue of deceit. What does it give to you, and what is gathered for you? Tongue of deceit? Sharp arrows of a warrior with coals of broom wood. Oi, for me, that I have sojourned with Meshech, and I have dwelled with tents of Kedar. Too long has my soul dwelt with a hater of peace. I am peace. But when I speak, they are for war. So clearly there's a sense of a psalmist who feels threatened. We're not sure what he feels threatened by, though the main focus of this psalm is the power of words. Save my soul from a lip and I kept it in the singular, as is the Hebrew, a lip of a lie, a tongue of deceit. The Malbim will make a distinction between a lip of a lie, which is done behind one's back, and a tongue of deceit, remiyah, which is the person who acts friendly toward you and then is dishonest with you. So the next line, 3, what does it give to you? What is gathered for you? Tongue of deceit. And here is some ambiguity. The lip, the lie, the tongue, whose tongue is it? What is the nature of the danger? Is it war? Is it slander? We don't know. And even more, as a possibility, is the psalmist speaking to is it rhetorical? He's just talking to himself? Is he talking about somebody else to them? Or is he talking to himself? Is his hesitation that he himself saved my soul from a lip of a lie? We don't know if it's self-reflective, that it's his own misuse of tongue. Sharp arrows of a warrior. Gibor is also translated as, by some, a mighty person, a mighty man. Might translated as a hero in other contexts. With coals of broom wood. So this notion of broom wood in verse 4, gachalei ritamim. Broom wood, some say it's related to juniper, is a wood of the desert that is identified as the wood that burns hottest and retains its heat longest, so that you might think there's no more fire in that coal, but if you reach out, its inner is still extraordinarily hot. And that makes it like an arrow, meaning once it's on fire, once the arrow is released, it has a danger that is concealed on some level. Just like words, once released, have a power to damage and can't be pulled back. Interestingly, this image of Gachalei Ritamim in 2 places in the Talmud is identified with the fires of Gehinnom. Gehinnom literally is the valley of Hinnom, where human sacrifices were brought, and they say in Arachin 15b that it is to be likened to the coals of broom wood. In Avodah Zarah 3b, they say the punishment for interrupters of study is that gachalei ritamim, these coals of broom wood, will be placed on their lips. In any event, back to the image here of 3 and 4 is the power of the tongue that misspeaks. 2, 3, and 4, which is at the center of this psalm, with 4 being the middle verse, and dangers. One other explanation of these coals of broom wood, which is I think how it's translated in Lev Shalem, is that to finish off an arrow, to harden it, to polish it, you put it in fire, and it's a way of characterizing just how prepared and sharp these arrows are. So that's another way to translate and to understand this danger. Verse 5 begins with a word that appears nowhere else. I love this, that almost as often as not, Psalms seem to have, even a short psalm, a word that appears nowhere else. Psalm 119 had 3 such words. Here, the word Oyah appears nowhere else. It's usually translated as woe to me, Oyah li. that I have dwelled. And Garti is sojourned. It's a transient. It's being a stranger in a strange land. And here, the two places, Meshech and Kedar, are located as two places of remarkable distance from Israel. It's not clear exactly what they are. Meshech, Josephus will say, and Ibn Ezra will pick up on this, as Tuscany. Should be an interesting thought that Italy is mentioned. But most commentators see Meshech, which is mentioned once in terms of the sons of Noah, and then Japhet is one of his sons, and Japhet's descendants is Meshech. And Meshech later will be understood as the northwest extreme, where like the Black and Caspian seas meet, the barbarous peoples of Asia Minor, a dangerous, distant people. And Kedar is the second son of Yishmael in Genesis. And he, Kedar, Radak ibn Ezra will identify with the south, Arabia, nomadic and dangerous nomadic tribes. So Robert Alter will say this description of I have sojourned with Meshech to Kedar is the equivalent of saying, you know, it's the distance, it's like being Siberia or Timbuktu. So it can be understood as a metaphor for I have sojourned in distant, dangerous neighborhoods, but not necessarily that the psalmist was in Meshech or Kedar, but the people among whom he lives are to him like the people of Meshech and Kedar, dangerous with their words, and he feels like a foreigner in their midst. So back to the word Oya, which could also be, if you change the punctuation, the vowels, which of course come later, it can be oi, ha. And I couldn't help but hear it when I read it as oi instead of whoa. So I looked up, the origins of the word oi, and they seem to be from early German, as is the case of much in Yiddish. And yet I'm left to choose to translate it as oi, because it's what it's conveying. Oyali, woe is me, oi for me. And who knows, maybe the biblical, again, it's the only time in the Bible the word is used, would later influence that early German. So here we're back to the psalmist and the psalm. He's feeling oi, the dangers of 2, 3, and 4. And you can also understand 4 is an answer to 3. What does it give to you, and what is gathered for you, tongue of deceit? Adin Steinsaltz will add in his commentary, what is given to you other than your self-satisfaction when you engage in deceit? And then an answer, what is gained are sharp arrows of a warrior with coals of broom wood, meaning I gain a quality of power. But the psalmist, and again, there's ambiguity. Is the psalmist chastising himself for his own having used, words? But probably more likely because of verse 5. With verse 5, there's the sense that his neighborhood is a dangerous neighborhood, and it's those neighbors who have created for him oyali, a quality of pain that he wants to escape from. And here, Rabat Shachna lah, too long has my cell dwelt with a hater of peace. Now pause. This is the first of the Psalms of ascent. Ascending, it's in the plural, the word ascending. And the notion that the psalmist is in a place of Sarah, where verse 1, Sarata, a place of distress, but as we've seen, the word sar means narrow. He feels he's in a rut. Again, that same word used in the noun Mitzrayim, Egypt. This man has a history of having been in ruts, either before and is now engaging in a prayer to emerge, to ascend from a rut of Lashon Hara, a rut of feeling surrounded by those he can't trust, who hate peace, who create turmoil. One more echo, Isaiah 57:19. Shalom, shalom l'rachok, peace, peace, l'rachok u'l'karov, for those who are far and close. Amar Adonai, said God, Refativ, and I will heal them. V'harshaim kayam nigrash ki hasheket lo yuchal, but the wicked are like an unsettled ocean without any ability to be quieted. And so that echo of Isaiah 57:19 is present in terms of he wants to ascend. He wants to leave the turmoil of those who use their tongues to create uncertainty. And then concluding line, Ani Shalom, I am peace, or it can be, I am peaceful, I am whole. That can be self-description or aspiration. In fact, the entire psalm can be seen as either self-description or aspiration. But when I speak, and again, it's back to words, that's the key theme throughout this psalm. How they speak, how I speak. When they speak, they are for war. One midrash, and then to pull this together, and I still have in the back of my mind the challenge of Rabbi Scholklapper to elevate the experience of the psalm to the mystical. But a colorful midrash relating to the origins of this psalm that's in the Talmud, Sukkah 53a and b. The story is told that David, the king, who's identified with psalms, was not given permission to build the temple because he had blood on his hands from the wars throughout his career. And so God said through Nathan, the prophet, not you, but your son will build a temple. But David, so the characterization goes, said to himself and his people, I can do everything to prepare. I will dig the foundation. If I can't build it, at least I can prepare for its building. And he dug the huge hole. And if you know the Temple Mount, it's the size of 2 football fields. It's quite massive. He dug, and the Talmud recounts that water from deep down, because it was so deep, the hole that he dug, began to rise and rise as if he had unplugged the huge container of water. And there was a fear that the water would overwhelm the world. And he said to Achitophel, his great advisor, what can I do? And Achitophel said, if the Torah gives permission for the priest to write God's name and put it into the potion in a woman accused of infidelity to test her truthfulness, if God will allow God's name to be erased to save a marriage. Surely, to save the world, you can write God's name and throw it into the water. And so, back to the Talmud, the account is that King David wrote God's name on a shard of pottery, threw it into the water, and the water receded 16,000 cubits. But it was so far now beneath the surface, all the water, that David worried that the water would now be inaccessible. And so he began to chant 15 psalms of ascent. And with each of the psalms, the water rose 1,000 cubits, coming to rest at a healthy 1,000 cubits below the surface. So that's a colorful story in the Talmud of the origins of Shir Hamalot, of this being the first of those. So let me now try to draw this together. And let me do so where I get to see everybody. Makes me happy to have a nice gathering as we honor Rabbi Showklapper. What is true of this psalm is that the mindset is that of hope. The psalmist begins with words of hope grounded in the past. When I was distressed, I called and God answered me. I have a history of a responsive God. And mind you, the theology of the Bible is God doesn't necessarily prevent us from getting into trouble, but can help us get out of trouble. That's the reoccurring pattern. It's when we are in a tough spot that we call out to God and God helps us emerge. But we get in those tough spots by our own choosing. And that's the ambiguity of this psalm, is the tough spot that the psalmist finds himself in due to his own tongue? Or rather, is it the tongue of his neighbors that is like an arrow, is like a burning coal? And both, of course, as we see in Psalms, can be true. The word shalom, where this leads to, I am peace, conveys a yearning to be close to God. For God is identified with peace. I am for peace. I am for God. And if you substitute the word peace and God, they are haters of peace. I am peace. They are for war, is another dimension. Martin Cohen, in his commentary to Psalm, does a large riff on I am peace, describing how it is aspirational. To be truly at peace is to be tranquil, to be whole, to be complete. And in that, as the goal of the journey, we are then close to God. Last comment. This psalm ends without a resolution. It's not the only psalm that doesn't pull it together. We see it in Psalm 12 and others. In that light, this is a psalm that initiates a journey toward shalom, toward peace. Knowing that as the journey begins, there's a sense of tsuris, sarah. There's a sense of feeling at times a stranger among others, with the sense that there is the possibility, layer by layer, step by step, growing closer to God, to one's own inner harmony, to one's sense of peace. With that, some reactions to the psalm. 18 chai is a good number for us in terms of our number of screens today. What for you was evoked in the hearing of Psalm 120? All right, I'm going to put you on the spot, Ariel, since You read it before. What gets evoked for you, Ariel, in hearing the psalm?
uh, this psalm particularly, can you put it back up so I can see just for a moment?
Absolutely. One second.
Let me get it. And then we can take it down because I do want to see everyone's faces, but give me one moment to just.
Yeah,
Ah,
I'm scrolling slowly.
yeah, you're good. Yeah. 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 I think it's such an interesting thing that it comes from an ethical stance in terms of, to me, I see the beginning of this. It's like there's a question of interpretation of what you do with what you do with that present, that, like, is it present, is it future, right? It's not clear totally who's talking to who. In all these psalms, we have to sort of choose a guiding line, but if we want to translate it, but in the text itself, there's a lot more mystery. So I find it interesting because even in that first line, there's a sense of, like, there's the possibility that you could read it if you wanted to punctuate it that way, that God is the one that does the, like, batsarata, right? It's like, God does that to me. Batsartali, right? You did this to me, like, right? And then you saved me, right? It's like a sense of the divine is everything, right? That's right. Batsaratali, karati veyaneni, right? And then you stuffed me up. El Adonai Batsaratali, you stuffed me up. You shut me tight. And then I called out, and then you answered me. It's almost like, and then it says, like, what did you save me from? You saved me from my soul, from the lips of a lie, the tongue of deceit, right? So yeah, you can zoom back out now, but
No,
it's like,
I like it.
yeah,
You're evoking and enriching.
that there's a sense of here of saying, I think we all know this at the end of the day, that it makes sense when I say it, it makes sense. But it's like, if you're not living a life of upright honesty, truth, and y'all have done this. You went through the book with Dr. Wolfson's book, the first question of what gets you into heaven, right? The first question is like, how did you deal honestly in your business dealings? It's like basics 101. Were you truthful or not? Right? Did you lie and deceive, or were you straight? And it's like, there's a certain sense in our tradition, I think, and this is what it's saying. It's like, if you want to be uplifted, and you have to like uproot those pieces of your life. If there are any parts of your life that are reflective of that reality, it's an ethical guide. This is saying, yeah, if I'm being dishonest and having a deceitful tongue, how could I feel peace? Right? It's like, how could I feel peace if it's not? Is this my time to reflect a little bit more? Or are we
You can
inviting
keep
others to?
reflecting. No, keep reflecting.
Uh,
Let me
uh,
just pause. Let me just pause, and then you'll keep reflecting. Today
yeah.
it'll be you reflecting. And I just want to underscore what Rabbi Ariel has pointed out. See, in grammar of the Hebrew, you make choices. I do my translations largely in order. So in the order, it's to Yud He Vav He, to the ever present one, but Saratali with Tsuris, and there's an ellipsis, which is you, but Saratali, you caused me this tsara, this narrowness, and meaning God was punishing him. It's not clear for what, but that's a way to read that second line. And then karati v'yaneni, and then when I was in that narrow place of punishment, I called to you and you answered me. And then this can be a reflection on what put him into that narrow place, that place that's the opposite of shalom. And that's having misused his tongue. Because now he repeats Adonai, and it's the only other place you get Adonai repeated. So, Adonai, again, you caused me to be in that narrow place. Adonai, you saved my soul. And the last thing I heard you share, Ariel, is the sense of the choice of the word soul, nafshi. In the Bible, nephesh is soul. It can either simply be me, you have saved me, because they're often seen as synonyms. Others understand the choice instead of Hatzilali, instead of being me, as the choice of soul, as being the spiritual, the more complete sense of who a person is, and that it is words that can undermine a person's soul. Okay, go ahead, keep going, Ariel.
Yeah, so this is what it brought to mind, in the background of my shot here. I don't think I need the text anymore at this point. In the background of this, you see the picture over here, right here. Yeah, right there. Can y'all see it?
Yeah.
So it's this photo that I took in Guatemala on top of a ruin where they predicted that 2020, which has passed us now, would be the end of times. I remember they said that, and I was like, who would even know that? Because they said the calendar runs out or something like that, right? Something like the calendar runs out. I remember I was sitting in this. I was younger and more frugal then, so I was traveling on a very much lower. I had a lot of time, but not a lot of money, so I was going on the cheap. And I remember hearing in the streets in Guatemala, I hear in Hebrew somebody yelling, "Hargash Pa'il, Hargash Pa'il." There's which I was like, first of all, I did a double take. 20. I don't know. I think they said 2020 or yeah. And Hargash Pa'il means in Hebrew, it means Hargash is a volcano or a mountain, right? Pa'il means active. It means it's an active volcano. So they're saying, it's like I had to do like a double, like my mind was in the wrong place. You're thinking about, you're going to hear Spanish, maybe you'll hear English, but not Hebrew, definitely. But they're yelling out in the streets, there's an active volcano in Hebrew. So, we go out into the streets because it's like, that sounds pretty cool, right? And I'm traveling. I'm thinking, yeah, that would be so cool to go up go see an active volcano. Sounds scary, but also like, do we got to get out of here? What's the deal, right? Volcanoes, you never know, right? What we didn't know, are these people trying to scam us? There was a sense in Guatemala always, which was like, it was very dangerous. It still is very dangerous. And so we didn't know, are we being taken? Are they going to stuff us all into a van and like rob us? Or how do we know we can trust these people? So we asked a few other Israelis. I was traveling with Israelis. Are these legit? Are these people legit? And they say, oh yeah, it's legit. You can go with them, right? So we pile into this van to do this ascent, to do this mountain thing, right? And I'm like scared because I feel okay a little bit, but I'm a little scared because it's a volcano. That sounds pretty serious. And we get to the base of the mountain, and it's like as if we changed. It was daylight when we started, but by the time we get to this spot where we're gonna hike, it's like, I don't know, like foggy, misty, cold, windy. It was surreal almost. I thought I was in an alternate dimension. And I thought to myself, like, we're walking up this mountain and the scene is like, it's what you would imagine was happening if there was an active volcano. But like, it felt like the ground was rumbling beneath us. It felt like the ground was shifting underneath us even. And what seemed true by the way that the guides were bringing us up the mountain was that the path that they had gone up like earlier that day or the day before or whenever they were last there was no longer viable. like it was they had to strike a new path because so it was a sense of like, I have my life in these guys' hands. And we're trying to go up to this mountain, and you can see, and then we actually did end up getting, as we get up closer, it went from cold and windy and this and that to like hot and muggy. And I want to show you this picture of it's like not the best way to show it probably, but you can see that's me in my little Adidas tracksuit, having climbed up the mountain, which you can see that like it was cold. I was wearing gear for cold, but by the time we got to there, it was like extremely hot. My backside, I thought that my clothes was going to melt off onto me at that moment. But it was a very, very, very slow moving mass of lava that was like, it was extremely slow, but it was progressing. It was coming towards us, but it was very, very slow. So it was this interesting raw power moment that I'm sensing in this psalm. That it's like I want to go up to that mountain because it reminds me of how tenuous life is. Like we're all sitting on this, we're on the surface. Like this is that image that that Rabbi Spitz gave us right at the ending of if the water goes too deep, 16,000 is too deep. We're not going to make it, right? But 1,000 we need, that would be good, right? And we don't want this lava overflowing up on top really much. We want it to stay lower. And, and we love when there's a spring, a nice spring, we love to go dip in a warm bath in the river. But we need a Sherpa to get there, right? I needed to put my life in the hands of others in order to get there. Otherwise, there's no way I would have made it up that mountain. No way, no chance. And I think about that. I think about the road that I've been on in terms of the mindfulness meditation, and how the paramitas is like the 10 spiritual, ethical, it's a project I'm working on now. It's the 10 ethical standards through the Buddhist world. They have it very systematized. It's not like us, Judaism. You have to find it all over the place. You have to search through a whole Talmud. You have to have a Rabbi Spitz to guide you, But they're like, here you go. Here's the 10 things. Figure out how to do these 10 things. This is the roadmap up the mountain. And when I've talked to my friend, my guides who are doing the Jewish mindfulness. Yeah, what's that? I'm sorry.
Just take one more minute to pull it together.
Yeah, I'm pulling it together right now. Yeah.
Okay.
And when I talk to my guides, they say it's not that this is not in Judaism. It is. It's that it's not linearly in Judaism, and so I'm making it my task now to start to put it in a linear form in the Jewish package. So I'm doing now a series. I'm starting to line up the 10 Jewish paramitas. I'm taking the same stuff and I'm going to line it up through the lens of the Talmud, through the lens of our own tradition, so that we can have a path similarly with the twists and turns, but with a guide up the mountain. So this is what that psalm brings for me. It ultimately leads to peace, but that comes from the climb. And in, like the psalmist said right in the beginning, the first thing they needed to do is examine their speech. They needed to really do some work on how they are in order to become free.
What a beautiful sharing, Ariel. And I'm up on, with all the more with the photo you shared, I am identified with being in that moment of seeing the lava come down. Quite a wow, an enduring moment. And a wonderful way to launch us with Psalm 120 being our first of 15 Psalms upward. And as you share, Ariel, these Psalms are identified with the journey toward the holy space, toward God's presence, and that the place such a upward journey begins is inwardly, self-reflecting, and aware of the power of speech as the starting point for transformation in order to reach shalom. So, Ariel, a privilege to be able to honor you on the day after your birthday. May your celebration of this year continue to unfold ripple by ripple.
Man, thank you. I'm officially eligible to run for the president of the United States now. So
All right.
35. So just putting that out there.
It's a good age. A good age.